There are many things out within the post-apocalyptic wasteland that are absolutely terrifying to come across for anyone wanting to explore the land and try and survive. Those things can be hulking great super mutants who have one mission, that being to further their species and create more from captured humans. Gigantic scientifically created death claws that'll rip you in two in an instant, and of course the many raider and bandit groups who will take out anyone who gets in their way. One of these raider groups has been around since the vaults started opening, and over the many years has gone through many leadership changes and 3 different names. This group is known now as the Great Khans, a brutal raider group who will stop at nothing to get their way, raiding peaceful towns like Shady Sands for resources, setting up drug enterprises to enrich their societies in New Vegas, and killing and displaying their kills out within their camps. But who are the members of the Khans? What has been their history over the years? How have they learnt their skills, and where are they now? Well, in today's video we will explore this raider group who have become renowned out within New California and continue to live on despite their constant struggles. This is the story behind the deadly raider group known as the Great Khans. But before we explore their story, let me tell you of something that can protect you from these raiders looking to steal your valuable goods. Yes, Aradesh, it's another WiseFish who has been kind enough to sponsor this video, Surfshark. Surfshark is a fantastic VPN that really helps you protect your data from all those trying to steal it like the Great Khans would. Surfshark protects all of your valuable data using its great encryption technology, meaning that whatever you are doing online, your personal details will always be protected. Don't you worry, Shady Sands. With Surfshark VPN, you will be safe from those pesky raiders.
I will be forever in your debt for your courage and bravery, Wanderer.
But not only that, Surfshark also gives you access to geo-blocked content on many different streaming sites like Netflix and Hulu. Having this is great for someone like me from the UK, as I don't get access to things like Hulu, and for my American viewers this is even better because you get access to some of the best British shows of all time by just changing your filter to whatever country you like, and then you can watch whatever you like without worries with just one click of a button. But on top of all of that, you can use it on multiple devices and all platforms you can think of, which is a real rarity compared to other VPNs, as well as many other features. And with today's deal, you can get up to 83% off, as well as 3 extra months free with my code WiseFish. So to get this awesome deal, click the link in the description or go to surfshark.deals/wisefish for protection that Shady Sands and the NCR would be proud of.
I am online once again!
So thanks to our fellow WiseFish Surfshark for sponsoring this video, and with that, let's get back to it. Our story begins like most with a vault, more specifically Vault 15. Vault 15 was one of the weird experiments by Vault-Tec where they would bring together people from radically diverse backgrounds with different ideologies and different cultures to see how they all work together, with Vault-Tec predicting that it would fall to pieces in the 50 years it would be sealed for. As this vault closed and all of these residents set up their lives inside it, many would separate into their own groups, forming their own subcultures within the vault itself. Eventually though, the vault would open its doors once again, and immediately the residents would pour out, stripping the vault of all of its precious resources and valuable equipment. One of these groups that left the vault took with them the most precious resource the vault housed, a Garden of Eden creation kit, a terraforming device that would allow anyone that used it to bring back life to the world once again. As this group set out on their new life, they would go on to set up their lives within a new area, using the Gek to help create the farming town known as Shady Sands. For the other individuals, more importantly the group that would go on to call themselves the Khans, these individuals would leave the vault in the year of 2141 and would come together fully in the winter of that year. The Khans only really had one ambition in life, and that was becoming successful warriors and raiders, locating any town they could find within the land land and robbing them for all they had. The name most likely coming from the Mongol Empire leader Genghis Khan, who was also known for this brutal, ambitious lifestyle back in the early 13th century. Like Caesar's legion being inspired by Julius Caesar, it would be safe to say that at some point one of the members, either before or after they went to the vault, was inspired by texts of Genghis Khan's life, and because of it wanted a taste of the emperor's life. As the Khans ventured around looting villages for resources and regular loot, they would also go on to burn down any building or possession that was of no use to them, as well as capturing survivors and using them as slaves for their newly formed society. A lot of similarities could be formed with Caesar's legion, who granted at this time didn't fully exist yet, but regardless, the two share a lot of similar ideologies. One in particular was fundamental to their societies, that one being survival of the fittest. Fitness and strength was seen as a key virtue and would be displayed through hand-to-hand combat to prove who exactly was the strongest and that they were worthy of a role in the Khans regardless of gender. If one person was not strong enough to be a part of this society, they would be labelled as weak and would most likely be killed in hand-to-hand combat or killed by their tribe's leader. With this view that strength was key for their society, this would mean the Khans would actively seek out other tribes to battle against them to test their mettle. One of their most memorable displays of this was when they went to battle against another tribe also from Vault 15, named the Jackals. This war against the Jackals really proved how strong the Khans were during this time, as they absolutely destroyed the Jackals, forcing them to completely flee the New California northern eastern area in the year of 2155. But exactly 6 years later, the Khans' leadership would change in an extremely brutal fashion. Here, the tribe member and son of the Khans' leader, Garl Deathhand, would kill his own father to prove he was the stronger member of the family, and on top of that, become the new leader of the Khans. Now the new leader of this tribe, Garl and his warband would become a dominant element within the wasteland, constantly going out to raid smaller settlements and communities, as well as setting up trade links within Junktown and the hub. With his warband being extremely successful during this time, Garl became extremely delusional, believing that he and his Khans could take over the entire world, which to many other individuals within Junktown and the hub would be seen as laughable. Eventually, Garl would step up his operations and the Khans would become more hostile throughout the wasteland, especially up north where many settlements were facing complete destruction. But this new ambition of taking over the world would ultimately lead to his inevitable downfall and the fall of his Khans. As Garl went around thinking he was the next big thing, he would make one big mistake, and that was by capturing Shady Sands leader Aradesh's daughter named Tandy. As Tandy had been captured, a sole vault dweller from Vault 13 hunting down a new water chip for his failing vault would hear of this and seek to help Aradesh get her back. Locating the raider group, the vault dweller would prove that Garl's dream of taking over the world were indeed delusions, as the vault dweller would go on to slaughter Garl and his tribesmen and save Tandy in the process. The Khans' power had now dropped massively as their leader had been shut down by a lone vault dweller. Because of this change in power, the Khans would dwindle and the NCR was able to rise in power to create order all over the California area. But this wasn't it for the Khans, as one member had survived the onslaught of the vault dweller. That member was Garl's own son named Darion, who had escaped during the attack. For a while, Darion would go his own way, picking up pieces of the small Khans who had suffered from Garl's loss. However, eventually Darion would suffer from survivor's guilt and began plotting his revenge against Tandy, who he believed caused all of this, and had now become the new leader of the new California Republic. With this new goal from Darion, the new Khans were set up, and their goal was now to shut down President Tandy of the NCR. With the wasteland now free from the threat of the massively powerful Khans under the rule of Garl, the new California Republic was able to emerge and become an absolute superpower, setting up trade links and allowing for more law and order throughout the land. Electing Tandy as their new president, Darion became absolutely obsessed with his new plan of taking her out, constantly living with regret that he hid and lived rather than dying honorably with his gang. Not only did he become extremely obsessed by this, but he also became overwhelmingly paranoid, believing that Tandy was actually out to get him. But luckily for him, this didn't hold back his overall ambition. But now that the first Khans had been destroyed completely by the Vault Dweller, Darion was not able to bring together the previous Khan members and instead had to settle for mercenaries to populate his new Khan's tribe. The year was now 2241, and going back to where it all started, Darion and his band of mercenaries set up their base within the ruins of Vault 15, using a large band of vagrants to provide a smokescreen. Within the vault before this, however, was a group of squatters, and Darion knew he needed to secure this as his base, promising to them that he would bring the vault back to its glory days and restore all of its functions. He would ask for their loyalty in return, making the squatters deter NCR attempts to retake the vault for themselves. Whilst living in Vault 15, Darion and his mercenaries would continue to capture squatters, as well as regularly raiding Republic caravans for water and food to make sure the vault continued to look like a functioning bunker. On top of this, Darion also used guerrilla tactics and placed a spy within the NCR Congress, which allowed him to get regular intel on their movements and future plans. But with all of this in place, seemingly like Darion would be able to extract his revenge on Tandy and with it the NCR, allowing the new Khans to be a dominant power once again, it was to all fall apart once again as another Vault Dweller, labeled the Chosen One, entered the equation. Sent on a mission by Tandy herself, the Chosen One was to seek out Vault 15 and acquire computer parts from it. With this, the Vault Dweller was able to broker a deal between the squatters and the Republic, and with it would leave Darion and his new Khans vulnerable, eventually wiping them out and retrieving the parts. With the new Khan's base now empty from their rule, the squatters allowed the NCR full access to the vault in exchange for annexation, education, and supplies necessary to survive. The Khans who once inhabited New California were now completely gone. Garl had built up one of the most fierce raider tribes known all over the wasteland, but it was not enough. And although Darion tried to recreate what they once had, they were never the same. Forming mercenaries would never be the same, as they would never share the same culture as before. But thanks to two Vault Dwellers, their power was now non-existent, and their terrifying rule was just something of the past. But amazingly, this was not the end of the Khans. Despite Darion believing he was the only remaining survivor of his tribe, there were indeed others. But seeing their power dwindle over the years, this group would seek prosperity elsewhere, and it was only in the year of 2267 would they appear once again. But this time, under a new name and leader. This time, the raider group would be known as the Great Khans. 25 years had passed since the events of Darion and his new Khan's fall, and the NCR had started their expansion out into the wider wasteland and into the Mojave desert. During this time, a few of the Khan survivors also ventured that way, collecting other members in their travels. At first, they were just a small group trying to survive whilst looking for a new home where they could rebuild themselves. However, as they ventured further, the Khans started growing, and with it became a unified, large tribe, all run under the leadership of one man they would label as Papa Khan, who would continue to lead them into the Mojave. As they assembled within the Mojave, the new Great Khans would come into contact with the followers of the Apocalypse, a pacifist group desperately trying to educate those within the wasteland about the errors of humanity's ways before and during the Great War, hoping a war like this would never happen again. Willing to educate and help anyone regardless of their backgrounds, the Khans were taught basic science skills such as chemistry, as well as reading and writing. The followers were extremely hopeful that with this education, the Great Khans would go on to do good within the community, developing medicine for those who needed it. But as expected, the Great Khans had other ideas for this new knowledge that they had just developed. Instead of making medicine for people who needed it, they would instead go on to manufacture heavily addictive drugs and would begin setting up their drug running operation. This drug manufacturing was already helped thanks to the Great Khans' already vast knowledge knowledge of how to use plants and herbs, which they would be able to turn into mind-altering substances. Now with this basic science knowledge, they were able to make these drugs even more powerful and addictive, and because of it, within the Great Khan ranks, substance abuse was at an all-time high. But the Khans didn't just use the drugs for themselves, they would also keep some to sell onto other members of the Mojave, most significantly the fiends and West Side addicts, allowing them to gain access to supplies the tribe needed badly. Because of the teachings of the followers, it didn't take long before the Great Khans became the single most organized tribe in the wasteland and essentially ran the show. But this was all to change as the NCR showed up once again to try and take the significant landmark that was the Hoover Dam. As they entered the scene, Robert House, an extremely influential businessman who had survived the Great War, was woken once again and alerted to the NCR's presence. With this new emergency, House knew he had to establish himself as the dominant ruler of the land and took immediate action, offering the local tribes their own casinos to operate under his watch. As well as this, any tribe who swore utmost loyalty to Mr. House would be given instant access to weapons, ammunition, medicine, and other resources to allow them to fight back against the Great Khans, who had become too big of a burden for him and had declared war against anyone who wanted to challenge their rule. With this all set up, House was able to get on his side the Mojave Boot Riders, the Mojave Cannibals, and the Slither Kin, and together as one, they were able to drive out the Great Khans from the northern Mojave and force them to relocate at a location known as Bitter Springs. Bitter about their loss, Papa Khan and the rest of the raiders turned their attention to their old rivals from back in the day. Here they would go on to attack the NCR, raiding their caravans, towns and camps, learning quickly that they were extremely easy targets as no one would hit them back. Because of this, the Khans continued doing this for years on end. That was until the year of 2278, when the first Battle of Hoover Dam kicked off between the NCR and the new growing threat of Caesar's Legion. As the battle reached its end, the Legion were humiliated, with most of their important warriors being wiped out in the conflict. Not only did the Legion lose out massively, but the Brotherhood of Steel were also driven away, meaning the NCR's rule on the land was run unopposed from any competition. But despite the NCR becoming a bigger threat for the Khans, they continued to conduct their raids, but not for long. During one raid, 4 NCR soldiers would be abducted and killed by the Great Khans, and now that this had been reported, the NCR knew they had to act and stamp out this tribe who were becoming a nuisance to their rule. It was time for the NCR to hit the Great Khans where it hurts, and with it, they launched the attack on their home of Bitter Springs. Bitter Springs was a disaster for the NCR though, and from the offset went badly. As the NCR troopers deployed into Bitter Springs, the attack force was spotted almost immediately and made contact with the Great Khan defenders. During this moment, 1st Recon troops heard an intense firefight taking place and immediately spotted Great Khan members traveling down from Canyon 37, the Red Pass, to the Khans. This group, however, was composed of women, children, as well as elderly and wounded members, not threats to them at all. Reporting what they could see back to the High Command, the Rangers were ordered to just open fire on the individuals, and without hesitation, the sharpshooters obeyed the order and gunned down all of the vulnerable, unarmed civilians just looking to get to safety. After this event, many members of both the NCR and the Great Khans talk of the horrors of that day. One past child member of the Great Khans, now NCR member, Sergeant Bitterroot, stated that the Great Khans were the ones who incited it all, and they were just asking for it to happen at some point, stating he also did not view his past clan in a positive light at all, labeling them as scum and lazy trumped up raiders who attacked innocent settlers for fun, and teaching their children how to kill NCR soldiers, personnel, and civilians. For other members of the Great Khans, however, the Bitter Springs massacre caused many of them to develop PTSD and not want to talk about the events as it caused too much pain. Chance, for example, became a mute and abused drugs to cope with his constant flashbacks of the event. To many, this was just a way of NCR showing off their power and really highlighting how brutal they really are, with Chance believing it was nothing to do with miscommunication. Instead, it was done without hesitation and was absolutely on purpose to make a statement. Not all of the Khan members were slaughtered in this battle, however, but most were picked up by the NCR and were resettled at Red Rock Canyon. Now here, the Khans did try and continue to create a source of income, and and with that set up a drug lab within the desolate gorges. Years passed, and in 2281 their drug trade was finally making them a profit, and they now had their economy sorted, allowing them to have basic living necessities which they could not gather from the inhospitable canyon they now lived within. But now solely focused on this drug trade, any goodwill the Great Khans once had now gone completely, and the Khans now started making more drug trades to dozens of villages west of Vegas to avoid NCR's clampdown on them. The NCR did, however, notice these drug trades and wanted to act on it. However, an assault on the Red Rock Canyon was far too expensive in terms of caps and men, and the land was far too harsh to camp out on. It wasn't worth it in the long run. But the Khans, however, did want to hit back, and because of that, the Khans launched guerrilla war tactics against the Republic, straining their overall supplies they needed for their rule over the land. The only real problem with the Great Khans' full focus on their drug trade did mean that a lot of their smaller settlements were filled with drug-addicted individuals still hoping to forget the past events of the Bitter Springs massacre. Other areas influenced by these drugs were also falling into pieces, with many turning to junkie dens, with the Fiends being one of the tribes most affected. For the Great Khans, they continued to live, but their life was pretty poor. They had an extremely small civilization in a really uninhabitable area of the world. Their power on the land and the people is there to some extent, but it's not nearly what it once was, all thanks to the NCR once again. To many of the other tribes and factions out within the world, the Khans' way of life is not worth it, and that is also reflected in their leader Papa Khan, who just wants more for his clan, desperate to leave behind a strong legacy. Luckily for the Khans, however, Kaiser could see this, and with that sent out Frumentarius Garl to act as an ambassador to the Khans, under the guise of seeking a great warrior in exchange for promises of land, wealth, and ultimately revenge against the NCR to secure their allegiance. This proposal was accepted almost instantly thanks to Papa Khan and the rest of the Khans' utter hatred for the NCR because of what they had done to their society, and with it, the Khans were available whenever Kaiser and his legion needed them. Garl was also able to appease Papa Khan and his advisors, stating that they will hold positions of power within the legion. However, this was not actually going to happen for the Khans, as the legion would not fulfill any of the promises given, because in reality, Garl secretly hates the Great Khans, seeing them as unworthy of the Legion and subpar warriors. The only way to get the Great Khans to obey the Legion is by decimating them, otherwise they would just become a bother for the Legion. For the Khans, they have no choice in anything. They are a dying clan living in an inhospitable world. Their only chance of surviving is forming alliances, and with the NCR being their ultimate enemy, the Legion is their only hope. Without them, how else can they leave behind a legacy? With the Legion's help, maybe. Just maybe, Papa Khan and his tribe can become the elite warriors and can forge a new history with them. But to outsiders of the clan, we all know that sadly for them, this will never happen. And more likely than not, the Great Khans will just die out. However, the future relies on one person once again, that being the iconic courier brought back from the dead. With the courier's decisions, the Great Khan society could either thrive or it could fall once again. In the end, the Great Khans are just a shadow of what they once were, still a deadly faction, but just desperate to live on and create a new life where they can forge a true legacy for themselves. Every time they grow, however, they are always shut down. Maybe their only true hope is with the downfall of all of the other big superpowers of Mr. House, the NCR, and Caesar's Legion. Only then might they thrive once again. But for now, the brutal faction known as the Great Khans lives out within the inhospitable land of the Red Rock Canyon, hoping that one day they can go back to being rulers of the land, and their name can go down in history as the strongest in the whole of the wasteland. And that is the story of the Great Khans from Fallout 1, 2 and New Vegas. I want to say a huge thank you to you for watching this video, as well as my amazing patrons who allow me to make videos like this, including our small fishes, our big fishes, Christopher, AVP Man, Last Persona User and Arto Creme, our YouTube wise ones, Fiery Italian and Ico the Wolf, our sharks, Wow Such Gaming and Jason X117, our megalodons, Sinus, Jacob Garcia and Chernobyl Stalker, and our absolutely legendary starfish, Shadow SGT. If you also want to support this channel, you can find the link in the description below, but if not, please do leave a like, check out my other lore videos, leave a subscribe if you haven't already, as well as a nice comment to help get this video out there. But that's all for now. Sorry there has been an absolutely huge gap in videos. I just moved house and I can tell you it's extremely stressful and I had no time to do anything. So I'm glad it's over and I can make videos once again. So thanks for waiting around for this one. But that's it. Stay safe out there and see you all in the next one. Cheers.